Welcome back, everyone. You know, the stuff you sent this time, it's really about me thinking. All this stuff about leadership and success, and then like this whole starting with WHY thing. It's a lot.
Yeah, you've got excerpts from Sinek's book that start with why, and then there's that article, the one about the Wright brothers, right? And then you threw in that thing about people getting company logos as tattoos. It's pretty wild, honestly.
It is. I mean, it's a pretty interesting mix of stuff.
But it really shows you, how this idea of WHY, like how much it's everywhere, how important it is. We're going to really dig into like the psychology of why people do stuff.
Okay, yeah.
And I think, you'll be surprised at how much this applies to, well, pretty much everything, like leading a team or even just like figuring out what makes you tick.
I am intrigued, I've got to say. Especially that tattoo thing. I mean, what would make someone get a company logo permanently on their body? That's got to be some serious emotional connection, right?
Oh, absolutely. It's not about logic. It's about like belonging, being part of something, feeling like you identify with what that brand represents, And that's like right at the heart of what Simon Sinek talks about in that book. Start with why.
Right, right.
He says people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. And he's got this framework he uses. It's called the golden circle.
Okay, the golden circle. Yeah, I remember that from the book. It's like the WHY, the HOW, and the what, right?
Exactly.
But remind me how it works again.
So picture this, right? You've got three circles, one inside the other. The one on the outside, that's the what, like the actual stuff you sell, the products or services. The middle one, that's the HLW, what makes you special or better. And then in the center, you've got the HIWY, the purpose, the reason you even exist.
And most companies, they just focus on the what and the HOW.
Yeah, pretty much. Take Dell, for example. They make good computers, no doubt. But, they don't really give you a reason to choose them over like any other computer. It's all about what they do.
But then you've got Apple. They're all about the WHY, right? They're not just selling you a phone or a laptop. It's like they're challenging the way things are. There's like empowering you.
Exactly.
That really connects with some people, right?
Yeah, it really does. People become like super fans, almost like they're part of a movement.
Yeah, yeah.
Remember that Think Different campaign they did?
Oh, yeah.
It wasn't even about their products. It was about Einstein, Martin Luther King, people like that. Visionaries. That's powerful stuff.
Yeah.
Because it taps into something deep, It makes you feel like you're part of something bigger, something that matters.
It's funny you mention that because in that Wright brothers article, remember, they were competing with this guy, Langley. He had way more money, way more resources, but for him, it was all about the fame, the recognition. But the Wright brothers, they were different. They believed flight could change the world.
That's a perfect example of the WHY in action. They weren't just like messing around with engines and wings. They had this big vision, and that's what drove them, kept them going when things got tough. Sinek actually says this WHY, this sense of purpose. It's biological. It's how our brains are wired.
Wait, hold on. Biology. I thought we were talking business and leadership here.
Well, we are. But business, it's about people, right? And the thing is, our brains, they make decisions based on emotions, on how we feel. That's the limbic system. That's where trust and loyalty happen. And then later, our logical brain, the neocortex, it tries to justify what we already decided.
So you're saying when we really get a company's WHY, it creates this gut feeling, this trust, even if it doesn't make logical sense.
Exactly. That's why people are fiercely loyal to certain brands, even when there might be cheaper or even better options out there. It's not always about the logic. It's about the feeling.
Okay, yeah. I'm starting to see how this is bigger than just marketing or something. This is like understanding what makes people tick at a deep level.
It is. And this is important for everything, building a business, leading a movement, even just deciding where you buy your coffee. It all comes back to WHY.
Okay, so the WHY is important. Got it. But how do you figure out your WHY? It's not like you can just pull it out of thin air, right?
Yeah, that's a great question.
Yeah.
And that's something we're going to really dive into next time. But I'll leave you with this thought.
Yeah.
Your WHY, it's not something you invent, it's something you discover.
Ooh, cliffhanger. All right, everyone, we're going to pick this up next time and figure out how to uncover your WHY. So don't go anywhere. All right, so last time, remember, we were talking about that whole starting with WHY thing.
Right.
And how powerful it can be, and not just for businesses, but for everyone, really.
Absolutely.
But we kind of left things hanging around. Like, how do you actually figure out your WHY? It's not like it's written down somewhere, is it?
It's definitely not something you just find lying around. It takes a bit of digging, some introspection. You got to like peel back the layers and figure out what really makes you tick,
Yeah.
you know?
Okay, so where do we even start with that? I'm picturing like lots of soul searching, maybe some like existential crisis moments.
Haha. Well, there might be a bit of that. But a good starting point, is to think about those times in your life when you felt really alive, really energized, when you were just like totally in your element.
Yeah.
What were you doing? What problems were you solving? Who were you helping? What kind of impact were you making?
This is making me think about those Wright brothers again. The ones from that article, remember?
Yeah,
They were so convinced about the power of flight, right?
they were.
It wasn't about fame or money for them. It was about like changing the world with their invention.
Exactly. Their WHY, it was bigger than them.
Yeah.
It was about the impact they wanted to have. And when you connect with your WHY like that, it can really drive you, it can be a real force in your life.
Okay, that makes sense. But what if like you're feeling stuck? What if you haven't had those like big defining moments yet?
Well, in those cases, it can be helpful to ask yourself some maybe tough questions. Like, what gets you out of bed in the morning? What are you naturally drawn to? Is there something that like really gets under your skin, some injustice you wish you could fix?
Whoa, those are some heavy questions. This is getting deep. I mean, we're talking about those big existential things people try to avoid.
It could be challenging, for sure, but it can also be really rewarding. Because when you discover your WHY, it's like, you've got this compass, this North Star that guides you.
Right.
It gives you a sense of direction, a purpose, and it helps you make decisions, even the small ones.
You know what this reminds me of? That thing about Walmart after, Sam Walton wasn't around anymore.
Oh, yeah.
It's like they lost sight of their WHY. They were all about serving people. And then they started making decisions that didn't really fit with that anymore.
It's a classic example of what can happen when you drift away from your core values.
Yeah.
And it happens to individuals, too, You might find yourself in a job that pays well, but it just doesn't feel right. Or maybe a relationship that's, not really aligned with what you believe anymore.
So what do you do when that happens? Like, how do you get back on track, find your way back to your WHY?
Well, first you got to admit that something's off, that you're not where you're supposed to be.
Yeah.
And then you got to be brave enough to make a change, to course correct, to get back to what matters.
That takes a lot of like self-awareness, doesn't it? And honesty. And it can be scary to actually make those changes.
It can be, yeah. But it's also super empowering because you're living in line with your WHY. It's like you're not just going through the motions anymore.
Yeah.
You're living intentionally with purpose.
Yeah. Man, I'm starting to see how this WHY thing, it's way more than just a business idea, isn't it? It's like a whole philosophy, a different way of thinking about like your whole life.
That's it, yeah. And one of the coolest things about discovering your WHY is that it attracts other people who share those same values, who are inspired by that same vision.
That's interesting. So it's not just about you finding your WHY, it's about using it to connect with other people, people who like get you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Think about those people getting those company logos tattooed.
Right.
They're not just customers, they're like part of a community, people who believe in the same thing. That sense of belonging, it's really powerful stuff.
So how do you like bring that community idea to like a personal level? How do you build that tribe around your WHY?
It starts with being real, being authentic. You got to live your WHY in a way that people can see, share your passions, what you value, your vision for the future. Don't be afraid to put yourself out there.
That sounds kind of scary, honestly. What if people don't get it? What if they think you're like a little nuts?
Sure, there's always a chance that. But when you're genuine, you'll attract the right people, the ones who are supposed to be in your life, the ones who get your WHY, who are excited about your vision, and who'll be there to support you.
That makes sense. It's like you're sending out a signal, and the people who are tuned in, they'll pick it up.
That's a great way to put it. And that's how you build a community, a network of people who are in sync with you, with your purpose, who can help you actually make your vision a reality.
Okay, so we've covered a lot, right? We talked about how to find your WHY, how to stay true to it even when it's hard. We talked about like connecting with other people. But what about like actually doing something? How do you go from knowing your WHY to actually living it day to day?
Another great question. And that's exactly what we'll be looking at in the next part of our deep dive. We'll explore how to, turn your WHY into a roadmap, into actions, how to make decisions based on your purpose, and really build a life that reflects who you are and what you believe in.
All right, everyone, be sure to tune in next time for the final part of our deep dive. We'll be figuring out how to put your WHY into action and create a life that's true to you. All right, so we're back, ready for the last part of our deep dive into this whole WHY thing.
Let's do it.
So we figured out how to find our WHY, right? And how important it is to stick with it in like work and life and everything.
Right.
But now I'm thinking like, okay, so what? What do you actually do with it? How do you go from like this idea of WHY to actually, making it happen?
Yeah, that's a big question. I mean, it's one thing to, say, this is my WHY, but turning that into like real action, that's a whole other thing.
Totally.
Think of it like your WHY is like a compass. It shows you which way to go, but it doesn't give you the step-by-step directions. You still got to figure out the route, deal with the obstacles, all that.
Okay, so it's like you have the guiding principle, but then you need the plan, right? The strategy to actually make it work.
Yeah, exactly. That's where the real work begins, turning that WHY into like real actions, decisions, the stuff you do every day.
So how do we do that? Do we need like a super detailed plan, with timelines and deadlines, all that?
It doesn't have to be like super complicated. Sometimes the simplest way is the best. Just ask yourself, what can I do right now, today, that fits with my WHY?
I like that. So it's about starting small, taking those little steps that like show what you believe in, even if they seem, kind of small at the time.
Exactly. It's about building momentum, right?
Yeah.
Like every action you take, it makes you more committed to your WHY. And then you start seeing those results and it gets easier to take those bigger steps,
This reminds me of that idea we talked about, the megaphone. You got to make your WHY heard, right? It's not enough just to know it. You got to show it through what you do.
Exactly. It's got to be reflected in everything, every choice you make.
Yeah.
And when that happens, when everything's aligned, something pretty amazing starts to happen.
What's that?
Well, you start attracting the right people, the right opportunities. It's like your WHY becomes this magnet.
Oh, interesting.
Pulling in people who are on the same wavelength, who are inspired by the same things. Remember those folks getting those tattoos of logos we were talking about?
Yeah.
They found a brand that just like perfectly matched their WHY, their values. It was so powerful, they wanted to make it a part of them permanently.
That's pretty intense. But it's like finding your people, right? That community where everyone gets it.
That's it.
Yeah.
And when you've got those people around you, people who share that WHY, it creates this energy, You support each other, push each other to be better, and you end up achieving way more together than you ever could alone.
Okay, I'm like seriously inspired right now. But I also got to admit, I'm feeling kind of overwhelmed too. This is a lot, What if I like mess up? Make the wrong choices?
That's totally okay. It's all part of the process. Remember, this whole living your WHY thing, it's not a finish line. It's a journey. There'll be bumps in the road, times when you're not sure if you're on the right track. But that's all right. It's all part of learning.
So it's more about like being flexible, being open to changing direction if you need to.
Yeah, being able to adapt. The important thing is to keep that WHY front and center. When you hit a snag, just ask, does it fit with my WHY? If the answer is yes, then go for it, even if it feels scary or you're not sure what'll happen.
This whole conversation, it's been pretty incredible. We started with this random pile of stuff, leadership, the Wright brothers, tattoos, and we ended up talking about like the meaning of life, practically.
It's funny how those connections work, isn't it? You start digging into one thing and it leads you to all these other ideas. That's what I love about these deep dives. You never know what you'll find.
I'm so glad we did this. It's given me like a whole new way of thinking about, well, everything, my work, my relationships, everything.
I'm really happy to hear that. And I hope everyone listening feels the same way. Remember, finding your WHY, it's not a one-time thing. It's something you keep discovering as you grow and change. So stay curious, keep asking those questions, and keep trying to build a life that's true to who you are.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Well, that's it for this episode of The Deep Dive, everyone. Thanks for joining us. We'll be back soon with more fascinating stuff to explore. Until then, keep learning, keep growing, and keep living your WHY.